Yes, we will now finalize the day, and I'd like back on stage Arnita Melzob and also Professor Teke de Jong here for the panel discussion, the final panel discussion. So I hope you also, after hearing all of this, you also have some questions. And to start with, I was listening to professors this first day of workshop on Monday, and we discussed yesterday at the dinner, and I had some things in my mind, and I think this is a very appropriate place to ask about it. And first, what came into my mind looking to those grains and scalability and everything is that actually the picture of Amsterdam, for me, looked from far away from the biggest scale, looks very similar to a picture of Riga in a similar scale. Is that right?
Yes, I think so.
You think so?
The difference is on the lower levels of
Yes,
scale.
the difference is on lower levels, but again, in the first scale going down, we could also see the thing that there is some part of the city which belongs to the seaside and part which belongs to Meja Parks, which is this more expensive part, and the same is in Amsterdam. And then comes the central part, and then we can go down, and then it starts to differentiate. But for a person never been to Europe, looking to Amsterdam and Riga would, at the first insight, looking just on a map, on Google Map, would say, those are the very same cities.
Right.
Can you comment on this?
Yes,
why is that like that, and when, and why it doesn't seem so anymore?
Well, the curious thing is that I had the impression. What impressed me most is that the size is so exactly the same. It's a radius of 10 kilometers, and I call that a conurbation. But if you look at the other settlements, then you have either a city with a radius of 3 kilometers, and once it grows, it suddenly has suburbs of the same size and is 10 kilometers. Well, I compared many other European cities, and that is indeed the case. The medieval city had normally a radius of 300 meters. But in our country there were two that had a radius of 1 kilometer, and that was Amsterdam and Dordrecht. And that is also the case with Riga. It is approximately 1 kilometer. And then suddenly, if Riga grows in the 18th century, then it is the same size is copied, and it is suddenly 3 kilometers, you see? And now it is suddenly 10 kilometers. Well, it may be just dreams, but it is really fantastic. Everywhere is that the case, and the character is something else, of course. Both are harbor cities, and both are in a rather low land. So I think that it is not so surprising.
Okay, the second one relates maybe to my personal interest fields, and it's the microphone comes closer. Yes, it's about computers. You mentioned that in your life, in past 35, little bit more years, you have bought about 50 personal computers, and so of course not only for yourself but your family and for your workshop at university, and that means you have done also architectural design on computers, right? Have you designed using AutoCAD or whatsoever platform?
No, I use the computer mainly for experiments. So experiments of allotments, etc.
Yeah, but it's urban design in a way.
Yes, but it is not making a design for a location.
Great.
That's
so
by hand.
The question is about the scale factor. What I have always found like a problem, because we know architects use scale 1 to 50, 100, urban planners 1,000, 2,000 and above. And once it's printed out on paper, everything is more or less clear because you have seen and you have some experience collected. But when you go into the computer 3D environment, three-dimensional environment, you can zoom in and out all the time, and I've seen that people lose the scale factor. And I know there is one shortcut, and that's what I've seen many other people are doing who design a computer, that I have a sense of feeling of, let's say, this space or my own apartment, and then when I design something for someone, I just put another layer next to it so I see something that I know how big it is, and then I can have that sense of feeling. But this is maybe more question to Arnita, who is designing and did the London project, and I know is running an architect's practice with her husband. So how do you manage the scale at that work?
Well, I think that it's really important to switch from one scale to another, because otherwise you will always lose a notion of one or another scale factor. And I think that that's like kind of thing we always do when you have like a big project in a computer. You always zoom in too much and you don't see the big scale. You don't see the whole image, and I think it's always important to change it, to switch, and to be aware of all of the scales.
Okay, so now a provocative question. Who gives architect the right to design something in really large scale? And I will just say as an example something different before you answer the thing. I read that in the professor's second PhD that yes, you can hold a brick, you can start building something out of a brick, and a human being can even look at the brick and it seems like one piece, but you can build from these bricks a tower. If you look at it, it looks like made out of bricks, but if you go a little bit farther away, it seems just like one tower. But a human person cannot, like a citizen of a city, cannot build a whole city himself. That can be done with a team. And then here comes the question, who gives the right to architect in this biggest scale the rights to kind of play God or decide where what will be placed? And who gives the right of architect to work in the largest possible scale?
Is it a question?
It's a question, yeah. Maybe you can, Professor can answer the first and then Arnita can answer.
Well, if you have visited the school I showed with these corridors through all the scales and with rooms where all disciplines are different, and you have studied there and graduated with success, then you know the legend of every scale, and you know the connections that are different on neighborhood level from on district level, and you have an idea what a kilometer is, and then, in my opinion, you have the right to design on the scale you are graduated in.
Okay, but you know, in general, let's say after 5.5 years of studies at architecture school, you are like more or less able to do, starting from interiors up to urban planning. You're not very, maybe, okay, in diploma work you specialize, but maybe even in renovation, just working with old buildings and old substance. But yes, who gives the right? I mean.
Oh yes. One more thing.
Yes.
We had an architect, Bakema, and he had a book, and that was named From Chair to City.
Oh, that's exactly what I...
Well, he indeed made cities like that looked like a chair. So you live in the arm part, or
where do you live in that city?
Well, that kind of architects don't have the right to design a city.
Okay. Arnita?
Well, I believe that it's not true that architect can alone design like big cities. I think it's always have to be cooperation with all of the other fields that are involved. And I don't believe that the architect alone will play the role of God, as you say. I don't think that's the right thing, and I think that it's not happening like that as well.
That was just a provocative question, because when architect designs a private house, there is some regulations about it in that scale, like for his exact plot of land, what he has just bought, and then maybe only the family decides. And sometimes if you do according to all the rules, you don't even have to get acceptance from the neighbors. So in that scale, the family or the client decides, and then in another scale, again, someone else from local municipality decides together with sometimes discussion with the society, and sometimes it's done only afterward when something is built, because when something is proposed, not many arrive to discuss about it, but when something starts to happen, they start. So it's in different scales, it's different deciders, right, affected. And one thing was a little bit unclear about that. If you just jump over skipping one scale factor, I mean from 1 skipping the 3 going to 10, there was something that in Teke de Jong's second thesis was that if you just take only the even decisions or only the odd ones. Can you explain that? Because we didn't see that in the lecture.
Yeah, yes.
That's, I think, is very, very interesting.
Well, in the theoretical possibility is that something is true on 1 meter, but definitely the opposite on 3 meter, and again the opposite on 10 meter. So now you can have a conference with people, specialists on 1, 10, 100, and 1,000 meter, and the conference agrees completely. There is a law for urban planning, but there is another conference with those of 3, 30, 300 meter, and they turn out to conclude the opposite, and that is true for everyone. Well, both are wrong and both are right, but if you have no idea of scale articulation, you can agree with somebody, and later on appears that you do not agree at all. You can quarrel with somebody, and later on it seems that you are completely agreeing with each other, if you don't take care of the scale.
Right. So this is so important. This is like really, really so important to know and to feel, and in every level of scale, right? But also
so.
Then one more question is interesting. I know that maybe I just heat up the audience so you can prepare some very tricky questions, but okay, I'm lost now, so please, the audience. Do we have some great questions? Yes, please. You can get this mic.
Okay, I have the question. I also listen.
To me.
It's to you. Yeah, I also listened to the course of lectures of yours in Delft. So maybe you don't remember me. But it was a very big audience. It was around 100 students. Well, I have a question that the presentation that you did and the questions that are now asked, they're very philosophical. So actually, you're talking here about the philosophy of built environment. So what's the physical manifestation, the real design manifestation of your ideas about scales? Did you design anything according to these principles? Or, well, is there something we can see? And what do you think the benefit for the residents or for the stakeholders of such an approach?
Let me say, this is not a theory. It is adding language to discuss designs. So it is a language you can make all kinds of theories of. So it is not a theory, and there are also not principles alone that you think different about different things. Well, that is not. Well, you can call that a theory. And well, if there are designs, I myself always, in every design, look about the scale, but that I did it in a particular principle. Perhaps the principle here is that that diversity is difficult to design, and repeating is just copying. So that is no effort for me. Is design making something different and not making something equal? Well, I hope that I have made different things, but it is. I object that this is a theory. It is adding a vocabulary and making more precise definitions of things in the most simple way to discuss designs, and that is well, I made an effort yesterday with these facades, because I understood that mainly here are many architects, so they are interested in that level of scale. Well, even on that level of scale, it's important to distinguish the levels of diversity. And you can call it philosophical. Well, let me say you one thing. There is nothing more impractical than a bad theory, but there is nothing more practical than a good theory. If we didn't have Newton, and of course in that time they say, oh, you are so philosophical. Huh? Well, I don't think this is philosophy. Philosophy is about truth, and this is about possibility. It is something else.
Speechless.
That was not the intention.
Right. So can we evaluate and get out some more information? Maybe something related to what we've seen in previous, because now we have also time to sum up all the things in this larger scale with the question of communities, with the question of heritage of large-scale dwelling areas, with the scale. So the fantastic opportunity to ask questions. Okay? Please? Yes, here.
Okay, thank you. It's probably not very well formulated question, but that was something I was thinking when I was I'm here. When I was listening to you, and I was just thinking about Le Corbusier, The Radiant City, where he gets so amazed by how you have very simple forms, and then you can put them in so many different ways and different structures, and then he has this, his writing style where it's almost like a childish, that he's so happy that we can just generate so different cities from so simple forms, but you still get homogeneous, uniform structures. No, I mean,
right.
so the question is, well, yes, what to think about. I mean, also the same with housing estates.
This is typically a mixing of scales of an architect that is well, he looks to stars on the Christmas tree and say, well, nice city. But that is why I reformulated form as a dispersion in space, primarily of people. So that is why my ecology background says, well, it's about this distribution and abundance of species. Then start with the people to distribute them, and then build something around them. But all the drawings I see are about stone and building, and not about people. So first the people and their dispersion. Well, then you get not directly a star or something like that, you see? That is the difference in a concept of what is form. Well, why not simply say it's a dispersion in space? That star is also a dispersion in space, but if you think in urban terms about form, then I think you do something wrong if it is a shape with a boundary. A dotted, it doesn't need a boundary directly. You can draw a boundary, but it is already a form without a boundary. But architects cannot think in forms without a boundary. They think in shapes. Form is shape, but form is something more diffuse, I think. Is this something that you meant? No.
I think
Mr.
what
moderator, he is not content about his answer.
I think what he meant is that there are some architects that even in very big scale think of some geometrical forms and so that it looks nice on city maps and everything. Maybe it's even sometimes easier as a brand. The object becomes a brand. It's easier to sell for developers, and that's a pretty nice instrument, because we sell visualizations, but And sometimes what the latest marketing teaches us is to sell like feelings, to sell emotions, to sell all of that. But finally, it's if I've seen so many also students' works at university that, for instance, if 10 groups of 3 students, like say 30 students, make a design for one and the same place, then when the jury comes and evaluates, it may ask maybe the total amount of people living in that plot. But then the second criteria, they look at the form and the quality of visualizations, maybe the quality of drawings. If all the lines are there, correct, of course it's for academic reasons, it's right to teach that in that stage rather than later at life. But the thing is that if you would put out all of the projects in the same graphical, like black and white pictures only, but with dots where physically the people would be situated, is that like dispersion of species in space? And we could compare those qualities. Are they more concentrated and more like intensely living in some corners, or closer to river, more away from river? Like this scale thing, and what you have done research on is maybe also interesting factor how to evaluate and compare different things rather than looking, oh, you have a glossy paper, you have matte paper. Can you maybe comment on that?
Yes, yes.
Where is this direction? Where we are going in architecture nowadays?
Yes, in reaction on you and the questioner. What I would like to demonstrate is that the concept of form on 1 meter is a different concept from 3 meter. And from 3 meter is different from 10 meter. And that is why if you have references on 1 meter, then it is difficult to convince people that a sprawl-like form, which is beautiful on 3 kilometer, with the references of 1 meter, is nothing. You see, and that is the difficulty of selling your product with references of a client that has no idea of what 3 kilometer is. There is the problem, and that is something we have to work on, I think.
Yes, we have a question. Two questions, right? One here, one is over there. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Just want to dig a little deeper in the relationship between design and truth, because Professor De Jongh stated quite clearly that design is not about the truth. But still, I think what this possibility thinking is about is kind of unearthing, opening up the truths of the place, the truths of the situation, like Arnita did with this canal in London, that you actually you are facing the truth of the situation, and the possibilities somehow are about the truth. So well, would you either comment on that?
The concept is that truth is part of possibility. So I don't say that designers do not have to do anything with truth. No, it's part of possibility. The only thing is that their specialization is not the inventarization of the context at the moment, etc. That is for empirical science. They are much better in that. But of course, it is used in design. But if you see the scheme, it's part of possibility. I don't say that designers are never busy with truth. They are busy with possibility, and one of the possibilities is the actual truth. So, but it is broader. And the interesting thing is this scheme, I never had sufficient objection against this scheme. But the empirical scientists of the faculty were embarrassed by it. But suddenly, because suddenly their part of the world was part of design. And then I triggered them, of course. Science is itself a design. Empirical science is a design. You are not going to the forest to look for science somewhere. No, it is a human design. So why bother? But that argument did not land so easily, so I had to be more aggressive, and I had to say, design is a precondition for science. Take electricity. First, we designers had to make an electromotor before Maxwell at last could understand how that worked with his equations. We first had to design the steam engine, and 40 years later you came with an explanation of thermodynamics and entropy, etc., etc. First we have to design, and then later on you can analyze what we have designed, and that is the reality. Well, okay, now I have a lot of enemies between them.
Right, we have had a question here in the first row, please.
Professor, I'd like to come back to your lecture. You raised up one question and hadn't given an answer. You raised up a question regarding cafe. How many people I need to support cafe? That's real a question. Architects should know when they are offering in their sketch for neighborhood, let's have a cafe. They should know. You started to answer, but stopped quoting your statistic experts who don't know.
Yes,
can you follow up?
Well, I have the list in the reader of the masterclass. I have a list, but it's from 2010, and I thought a cafe was something. It's amazing, but you had much more management advising bureaus than cafes in the Netherlands. That was for me amazing, but I think it is approximately 1,500 people, but I don't know, because it is a list of 700 enterprises. So okay, I can look for you, but
yes, one more question over there, and then we have to sum up, please.
I had this great opportunity to, while talking to you, to talk on the subject of a language, and a language as a tool to understand, to make an understanding among different professions, and sometimes even among the different individuals of the same profession. We were talking about planners and architects in particular in this case, and you were mentioning that point in your lecture as well in a bit, that we are kind of learning the language and trying to discover it. Now you had this nice opportunity in Riga to teach the master class and to see Riga and professionals in Riga, and now you had this chance to see this conference that is giving you some kind of a, let's say, a middle temperature in a hospital that gives you an understanding what we talk about in here. So in terms of the language, what would be your I don't know, evaluation of where are we going? Are we discussing the right things, the interesting things? Are we going in some wrong direction, maybe? Or in the right one?
Well, I know this kind of discussions, of course, in any studio in Delft. But what is here, what was impressing me was that also architects, where are you, very definitely are very socially involved. So now my first PhD was also about sociology, etc., etc. And the young man has made me a great how do you call that? He said, "Did you forget all sociology in your last PhD?" It has something to do that I do not think that you can make society by building, and but you can facilitate, you can make the conditions for all kinds of societies, and I don't think that you have to be so obsessed by the actual social situation. If you see that in a totally other historical context there are made buildings for a totally other population, another social system, another thing, and still we use these buildings with great pleasure. How is that possible? Because apparently they have made conditions for many kinds of human life. And that was what I meant to say, well, we design a house not to cause a household, but to make many households possible. And I think that is the art. And of course, if you have such a project as was described today, then you are in the middle of a political discussion, and you have to answer the questions and the program of requirements of that social aspect. But never forget that it should not be only shape possibilities for this situation. Add something. Well, okay, that is my my idea about today.
Thank you very much. Oh, this is that now.
Okay, maybe I simply take on it. Yeah. Jonas Büchel, Urban Institute Riga. I actually didn't want to say anything. Still, I mean, I only was here in the morning and now like half of your lecture. But since I'm a community worker, a social planner, somebody who deals with this enemy, these people, humans, outside for 25 years now, could you do me a favor and take the next spray color that you find, go out and exactly write that on the next wall on Zianova Yellow on the street, what you just said. Because we do, I mean, since my very first time of life, the first minute when my mother gave birth to me, who was an architect, I'm surrounded by architects, and I decided not to be an architect, but still for sure, as you said, I'm designing, for sure I'm designing. It took me 20 years that architects understand that I am a designer. But it would be gorgeous that they would finally understand that they should also really design, stars. Because we will find a way to use them. It makes fun to also use a building after 200 years for a different purpose. And a different scale. So I think sometimes it's also provocative and necessary that an architect realizes just build and don't always take care of the social scale. Sometimes it's not necessary. Sometimes you provoke something with that which might be having a good outcome, an interesting result. And you just said it in a very nice way, and it was so wonderful you could text it immediately outside on the wall. Do a graffiti in this very clean town, I would be happy.
Do I understand that you totally disagree with...
I totally agree.
Okay. Well, happily. Well, then I can't answer.
All right. It seems that also the time of the conference is running out, and has actually run out. But we have managed to have all the lectures and everything so well that it's just 7 minutes over the planned time. And just to sum up, I think what Jonas just said, we will afterwards, in the informal part, write down once again the sentence, and maybe we produce these things that you can copy paste in several places and spray that thing out, and maybe it goes viral in other European cities and maybe closer to urban planning departments. I don't know. But talking about the sum up of today, I see there's really a lot of the social aspects going on, and planners and architects really feel very emotional about it, because, and maybe for Professor I can explain, we are very emotional here about these subjects because you saw also the statistics that more than half of the people from Riga happen to live in these large-scale dwellings, and this is like the majority of housing environment and has been for many of us as well. For instance, I lived, I think, 18 years, actually 17 and a half, in one of those districts. When finally, only when you start living outside that district, you understand that it's not very maybe healthy to live in that environment, because 5 of your best friends influence who yourself are. I've heard that statistic as well. And as soon as you start being together with someone, even from other part of the city, who can maybe see things from a side, you see it in totally different perspective. And that's when I started my architecture studies. So to sum up, I think we can agree that the scale is really important. And what we also saw in the masterclass, those who were not here I would really invite you next time when Professor will be in Riga. You will be in Riga, right? Oh yeah, until tomorrow morning. But I mean, next time when he comes to teach the masterclass, you plan it down in your calendars, because it's really interesting that there were some people from urban planning department and like opened eyes. Really, you can show information like that? And I mean, they already plan our city and do the things in maybe the traditional way, but just the thing to see the scale in different, it makes so big change that suddenly you say, oh my God, all that we have done so far is really not so difficult if we just change the scale, or we just zoom out or zoom in. So advice maybe for those who use computer, and most of designers actually use, try to, if you cannot zoom in and out and you're just too much into the zooming, maybe just step aside and look from a different distance to the same image you have, and that would also improve. That's what artists say, and I learned that if you don't see, if the proportions are right, just turn your head by 45 degrees and you'll start seeing this even actually the same drawing, what you have just drawn, differently. So use scale, and we are once again thankful for so many of you here.
So now I have to switch back to English. I'm really happy that a lot of you visited this conference. So we are looking forward to the next year around this same time.
So we next year make it double the size, maybe even 2 days of conference. And we must find bigger space for that. Thank you very much, everyone.